Most hunters are aware that controlling their scent is a primary concern, but knowing how they affect the environment itself is also of paramount importance. Knowing the prevailing winds and how to enter a hunting location with as little impact as possible is a good starting point, but to understand the movements of a whitetail is a never-ending process. Thermals and microclimates play a huge part in how whitetails avoid predators and survive in harsh environments. Thermals play a larger role out west with rolling hills and mountainous terrain, but they also play a vital role in whitetails' movements through an area at first and last light. This subtle movement of air is all the nose needs to skirt an area that's usually traveled. Thermals occur when the ground is warmed by the sun and then cooled as the sun sets. Knowing how your route to the stand will play into this occurrence betters your chance at a mature whitetail.
You know, when hunting mature animals, you definitely want to take advantage of wind direction and thermals. You know, a few things to keep in mind. You pick out your stand in the morning from your house. You know it's a northwest wind because you checked the weather station or you used your puffer. But it's getting to that stand. How are the deer going to move? Yeah, they're coming in from the downwind side, but how are they utilizing thermals? You probably can bet that they're going to use some sort of edge in your area. So I always try to position myself further away from where the deer is going to travel. I want to make sure I really don't cross paths getting into my stand from where that deer is going to cover. If you rub up against any kind of vegetation that hits your skin, you're going to leave human scent. Now that may not really affect an immature deer, you know, a 1.5 year, 2.5-year-old buck, but for those truly mature 3, 4, 5-year-old deer, they're not going to tolerate it. They're going to hit that, know that there's been a person in there relatively soon, and just vacate the area. You're not even going to see them as a hunter. So you really need to focus on how you're walking into your stand, you know, to utilize the wind, utilize the thermals to best blow your scent away from where the deer are coming from. If you do that, you're going to be more successful harvesting mature animals.
When we're talking about wind and hunting tactics, it's very important to revisit deer biology and the physical characteristics that make deer different than humans. There are 3 main differences that make deer different than humans. Number 1 is the epithelium lining in their nasal passages. Number 2 is the way their nasal passages are built, how long they are compared to a human's nose. And the third one is the olfactory bulb in the whitetail's brain. Let's talk about the epithelium for a moment. This is the lining in the nasal passage. In a whitetail, it's about 90 square centimeters. In a human, this is about 10 square centimeters. So the lining alone in a whitetail is 10 times greater than a human's. But there's major differences between a whitetail and a human. The epithelium lining in a whitetail's nose can be moistened and allows the deer to attract molecules and decipher danger. By moistening its nose and that long nasal passage, this allows a deer to attract so many scent molecules that it can decipher several different scents at one time. Also, the olfactory bulb in a deer's brain is much larger than a human's, and this allows a deer to actually store memory and understand what's danger and what's not danger. If we're walking through the woods and we catch a scent, we might spin around for a couple minutes trying to pick out where the scent came from. Deer are much better at this because the epithelium allows them to trap the molecule, and then depending on which way the wind is coming from, that will indicate exactly where the scent is for that animal. How many times have you had this happen? You're sitting in your tree stand, you blow on a grunt call or you do some rattling, and here comes a buck. He's got his ears pinned back, sidling posture, he's coming right to you. And as he's doing this, he's licking his nose frantically. Have you ever wondered why that is? Well, the deer's trying to put together the entire puzzle. He's got one piece, the sound. He knows that he thought he heard another deer. Now he's trying to put together the scent aspect of that puzzle. He's coming in, he needs to understand which other deer he might be dealing with. So he wets his epithelium, he's coming in and he's trying to pick out that scent. This is where your tactics and your scent control procedures come into huge play, because if you disregard the wind, if you go in there sloppy with your scent control, he's still going to smell you. What we know today is just knowing wind direction when you go hunting, that's not enough. You need to know about microclimates, you need to know how thermals and how these things work. Yes, you can sit there and you can have young deer walk past you all day long and think you're okay, but those mature deer have been there and done that, and they'll know the second one molecule of odor gets on that nasal passage, they're going to know where you are and they're going to avoid that area.
You know, one of the areas I hunt is relatively flat land, so there's not a lot of true hillsides or depressions or river bottoms that the deer are utilizing. It's basically lowland areas. But there are definitely areas that are affected by thermals. One of those is where the edge of the thick cedar swamps break open into the clearing with tag alders, brush, and a few tamaracks. You know, basically the heat's going to try to escape. So in the mornings, the thermals are going to rise, but they're rising in that lower area first. So to take advantage of that, I want to position my stand in that area rather than the thick cedars. Because when it hits, the thermal's going to follow that edge, hit that edge, and then go straight up because the other air is cooler. Therefore, your scent is dissipating faster. The deer are normally walking on the edges anyway, so they like to utilize those edges. Why do whitetails like these edges? You know, it's for security. Not only can they hear on either side of what's going on, but they can also smell. They've already walked through one of those areas, and now edges where all these scents kind of meet and merge, and they get that security. If they don't smell any human scent or any other danger, they're going to continue on. If they do, they're going to probably jump back where they came from. I mean, it just gives them that little extra advantage of playing the wind, and it gives them that added sense of security.
Another interesting thing that we have to deal with are microclimates within our woodlands. Microclimates can vary from one part of a ridge to another part of the ridge, and this depends on shade, wind, exposure, lowland, moisture, all these things come into play, and it might take you several years to figure out one piece of property why thermals rise or fall in different ways on one side of a ridge as opposed to another side of a ridge.
When talking about thermals, one thing to consider is the time of the year, winter versus summer or early fall. You know, early fall it's going to be hot, so where the deer are going to move, normally it's in the woods. They like the dark timber because it's cooler in there. Now in the winter, they're going to be in there at night because that same timber holds in the heat. But during the daylight, they're probably going to be out in the open, just where it opens back up so that they can get the sunlight. They're still protected from the wind because of the timber's there, but yet they're hitting the sun, so it's going to warm them up. They're trying to maintain as much body heat in the winter as possible, and this helps them do it. Let's talk about fragmentation. What that is, you know, when you have a big area of timber and a person makes food plots, say it's a destination plot, you got 1 to 5 acres or even smaller plots. How does that affect the wind? How does that affect your thermals? You know, by opening up that area, the wind's going to affect differently. You know, basically the canopy holds the temperature down. It keeps it cool in the mornings. You know, at night it holds a little bit of the heat in the winter. You know, so those are the way it's going to affect it. But what does it do for the hunter? You know, if I place my stand on the edge of a food plot and I have a west wind, it should be blowing back in the timber, the deer are supposed to be coming in downwind. It sounds like it's a great strategy, but in reality what's going to happen is that wind's going to blow your scent right into that thermal. The thermal's not going to allow the scent in there, so it's either going to push it up or normally around out to the sides. Therefore I'm pushing scent on both sides of me, which is probably going to swing all the way around in the food plot shape and come into the direction where the deer are supposed to be coming from. Therefore I'm really harming that area. You know, in a classic example, a guy could have a food plot off the edge of a creek, and all the scent is going to run down. It's going to warm up during the day. All that scent's in there from where the hunter is. He's hunting in there. It's going to drive it right down into the creek bottom, and therefore the deer, where they're bedding, is going to have all that human scent in there. I guarantee you two things are going to happen. One is every mature deer that was utilizing that creek bottom is going to move out of there. Two, you're going to sit up on that food plot and not see any kind of deer activity.